Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newtown Township Board of Supervisors meeting for April 28th, 2021 via Zoom. As normal, we have a moment of silence, and during that moment of silence, I just ask that you remember all those who have been affected by this horrible virus and their families, and those on the front lines, the doctors, nurses, EMTs, police, fire, all who answer their call to duty unselfishly, and those everyday important essential workers, the garbage collectors, the supermarket workers, the food servers, just to name a few. And here in our township, our management, our administrative staff, our public works department, together, they keep our township running. Let us support our local businesses the best we can, and please don't forget to tip generously. Most of all, let us treat people with respect and kindness, even those that we may not agree with. Together as a community, we will be stronger when this is all over. If you would bow your heads for a moment of silence. If you please recite the Pledge of Allegiance with the board. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any changes or additions to the agenda tonight?
There was one addition, Mr. Chairman. Item 11C4 has been added to the agenda.
Thank you. I guess we have no special actions tonight. Then we'll go into our first session of public comment. Anyone who would like to make a public comment on anything that is not on the agenda tonight, feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you. Okay, seeing none, we'll go into minor approvals. Jane Filios, the EAC, and Park and Recs Board has something to present. Jane, take yourself off mute and turn your camera on. I'm sorry, Jan. I'm sorry, I'm saying Jane. My fault.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's well. I'm a new member of the Parks and Recreation Board since the beginning of this year, and I thank you for the appointment. Have a small proposal for two of the parks in Newtown Township. One is at Helen Randall Park. There's a gazebo in the center of the park, and it has two beds alongside the ramp that goes up to it, and they've just been left unused. I'm not sure how long, but the proposal is to clean them up and seed them with pollinator-friendly plants, and then they'll be watered, and eventually they will be drought tolerant and deer resistant. I'm sorry. And then they would be salvia, echinacea, and yarrow, and I believe I included a few pictures for your reference. The other garden bed would be at Helen Randall. There's a 12 by 14 bed in front of the restrooms, and the planting plan would be very similar. It would be the same plants. It would also probably be seeded, or I have some seedlings already ready to put in. So that is the gist of it. And I would like maybe permission to put up a small temporary sign, maybe 12 by 18, that just says pollinator garden in progress, and then Parks and Recreation Department. That's it.
Any questions for Jan? The board?
Yeah, I had one or two. First of all, thank you, Jan. I see you're doing double duty on the EAC and the Park and Rec.
Thank you.
It's a leading question because I know the answer. These are native plants.
I would call them continental natives. I mean,
Okay.
certainly the yarrow and the echinacea. The salvia may have had a dalliance with someone south of the border, but it does well here, and it's considered fairly native. It's a hybrid.
I think I'm going to use some in my garden.
Sure.
Any other questions for Jen? Mr. Sander, or should we form a motion here to give permission to do this?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Mr. Chairman. It would be a motion to authorize Jan Filios, the EAC and the Park and Recs Board, permission to enter onto Carl Seedy and Helen Randall Parks to undertake a flower gardening project as outlined by Ms. Filios.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Questions from the board? Any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you
you.
very much.
Okay.
Right along, reports of committees, boards, and commissions. We have Mr. Fiddler from the Planning Commission here. Alan?
Good evening. I'm here to give you a synopsis of our April 20, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. We had 5 zoning hearing board applications. The first was for Rudy Crair at 771 Linton Hill Road. Here, the applicant is seeking a variance and a special exception for a front yard setback of 66.5 feet, where 100 feet are required, and a 40.5 feet side yard setback where 50 feet are required to build a 1-story kitchen addition. There's already a covered entry which has been built with an expired variance, as a property predates the current ordinance, creating a hardship, and the project has the support of neighbors, and a variance has been previously granted but has expired. Here, the commission recommended that the board support the application. The second one was for Michael Zerby at 6 Grace Circle. Here, the applicant is seeking a variance for increased impervious surface of 28%, where 25% is the maximum, to install an in-ground swimming pool. We recommend that the applicant's engineer detail the plan's ability to address the increased runoff, and that the board support the application. The third one was from Zach Kemp at 1 Waterford Place. Here, the applicant is seeking a variance for a front yard setback of 79.34 feet, where 100 feet are required to install a shed. This property has a hardship as it is a corner property of having 2 front yards. The commission again recommended that the board support the application. Item 4 was Rich Tomlinson at 178 Twining Bridge Road. Here, the applicant is seeking a variance for a side yard setback of 20 feet and 40 feet, where 60 feet are required to build a pole barn. The property here predates the ordinance and also requires a special exemption. The commission recommended the board not oppose this application. The final application was Provco, Pineville Acquisitions LLC, Wawa, Newtown Bypass and Lower Silver Lake Road. Here, the applicant is seeking a special exemption for the E30 motor vehicle fueling and convenience use. A majority of the members supported this request, but a minority do not support the proposed use. The applicant is seeking 8 fueling pumps, where 6 are the maximum permitted. The commission was unanimous in not supporting all 8, but there was some support for the 7th pump, as this is de minimis relief as 5 acres are required for 1 additional pump, and the subject property is 4.95 acres. All were supportive of the extension of the canopy to cover the 6 permitted fuel pumps. The applicant is seeking relief for 2 monument signs within 1,000 feet of the bypass and 2 wall-mounted signs also within 1,000 feet of the bypass. There were no objections to the placement of the signs, but discussed possibly locating one of the signs slightly further west on the bypass to alert eastbound traffic of the proposed location. The monument signs would have LED lighted electronic gas prices. A majority of the members oppose this, particularly as the other gas stations in Newtown have sought and been denied this variance request. Most of the members had no objections to the number and size of any of the 4 proposed signs. And that basically concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan?
I guess I had one real quick one on, and we're going to talk about these later, I guess. The Michael Zerby at 6 Grace Circle. Was there any suggestions for how he can document the additional information?
Basically, we just recommended including best management practices that he would be willing to include in the application to the zoning hearing board. And if they had a mind that those would be sufficient, they could require that as part of their consideration.
Thank you, Alan.
Sure, John.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you, Al. Oh, Ron,
Yeah, I guess we're going to talk about the Wawa later. But maybe I have a question that requires just some kind of definition of de minimis and why that is relevant. It seems like, merely labeling a variance request as de minimis makes it almost assured to be granted. Well, who determines whether a request is de minimis or not?
Alan or Dave? One of the two?
I would think that's a Dave question, but the planning commission realized that 4.95 acres are still available and 5 would be required. So there's a half acre that is deficient in the acreage of the net buildable site. Now, if that's de minimis, that was our verbiage, might not be the supervisors or the solicitors' consideration as well.
It's not, well, let me just correct that. It's not a half acre here. It's 0.05 acres. Between 4.95 and 5 acres is.
That is correct.
No, de minimis, John, to go to your question, is something that's been established by case law over the years in court decisions. And de minimis is just defined as a very small percentage between what's required and what's provided. Again, if you are asking for a 30-foot, you have a 30-foot setback and you want to put the fence 29 feet, 11 inches into it, and you're asking for a half of an inch variance, that will be considered by the court generally to be de minimis. It's done on a case by case basis. They do speak of rules concerning percentages, but again, I don't want to say X percent is de minimis and X percent is not de minimis. In this case, I would agree that 0.05 acres is probably de minimis, but de minimis goes to the fact that they would be allowed to have 1 additional fueling station for a total of 7 pumps, 14 fueling stations, rather than 8 pumps, 16 fueling stations that they're asking for. So the de minimis issue here only gets them so far.
Okay, what I believe is that, you know, if you give somebody an inch, they want to take a mile. And so if you give them seven,
We're not,
whatever they're called.
nobody's
Just wait a
giving,
minute, wait, let me finish. If you give them 7, they're going to ask for 8. But also, I was looking up a definition in lexicology.com, which I think cites the court case you're talking about. And it says the zoning hearing boards may also grant de minimis variances, which are very minor deviations from the dimensional provisions of a zoning ordinance, where the rigid compliance is not necessary to protect the public concerns inherent in the zoning ordinance. I would contend that the provisions of the zoning ordinance were put in there specifically to protect the public concerns inherent in the E30 ordinance that we created. So, you know, there's more to de minimis than the percentage or 0.5 acres. So it seems to me, but it's a legal issue. Thanks for your input.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Fiddler? Okay, seeing none. Alan, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Have a great evening, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll go to reports of board members. I will refer to Mr. Fisher.
Okay, finally got my microphone on. Two things I'd like to report, and one of the two I'm going to defer until the emergency services report. So we have been meeting with the borough, and we might as well talk about the fire things all together at the end of the meeting, if that's okay. The finance committee met last evening. We covered a lot of information, but two highlights are they made a recommendation for the administration to investigate new accounting software. Teresa, our finance director, and I were at the meeting and told them it was probably unnecessary, but because I think the administration is looking to do something similar anyway. So, but they wanted to add their recommendation to do that. So that was one thing, one piece. The other piece is that we're talking about ways we can assist the Economic Development Committee to encourage more economic development as the time goes by in the next few months. And whatever we can do, we'd like to help out with EDC. So I'm looking at David when I say that. So that's my report.
Thank you. Mr. Mack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was an unofficial Zoom meeting of the Technology and Communications Committee on Monday, and wasn't a quorum present, so it's unofficial. But the members of the Planning Commission, Environmental Advisory Council, and some members of these, plus the Human Relations Commission, attended and had an informal discussion of their communication needs. The discussion focused mainly on how to improve the usability of the website and the possibility of performing routine analytics to identify problem areas. And the committee members hopefully will get a quorum at a future meeting to further discuss this. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the Park and Rec report for April 28th. We have, again, early registration discount for 6-week summer camps, which ends April 30th. So I only have a couple days left. Camps are filling up, so get on it soon. Upcoming programs at Park and Rec, we have intermediate Tai Chi, and we have bead weaving basics. Then we have exploring archery and muralology workshop. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Oxley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know last meeting I was referencing some different links that we can get on the website for a lot of residents that may have some residents that may have some challenges with mortgage payments and so forth. And I spoke with Paula Watts from the Credit Counseling Center. She's the executive director, and she gave me a lot of information that we can post on our website via the Bucks County. So I've asked Mr. Lewis to add that to our website, and I believe he has done that already. Is that correct, Mr. Lewis? Mr. Lewis?
Yes, that information has been added to the website.
Great, thank you very much. And all of that information is based upon the CARES Act, but she did mention that there's lots of information that's still out there that a lot of folks don't know about. So this is a great way to circulate it. She said she's happy to come and do a presentation for the board, just to go through the entire program and how it works. I did also ask her, as the CARES Act funds are starting to run out, were there going to be programs like this with the American Recovery Act? And she wasn't sure yet, but she's hopeful that the program can continue. So more to come on that, Mr. Chairman. And as far as the Economic Development Committee, nothing to report there for this meeting, but I wanted to take a moment, if I could, just to share some thoughts, if I could, based upon what transpired last week. And I had a moment where I just put something down on paper that I really wanted to share, and I thought it'd be appropriate for me to do so, if the board would allow me to.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. As we all know, last week, the trial of Derek Chauvin was finished and completed with a verdict of guilty. But I just wanted to just say, as a Black man in America, last week was hard for me. Last summer, we all watched the murder of George Floyd play out in high definition. Yet last week, many of us sat nervously awaiting a verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin. There was justice, but why does it have to come to a 9-minute murder in daylight in front of horrified witnesses? Why is it only now that others understand the struggle? A bad cop was finally held accountable for the murder of an American citizen, an African-American man named George Floyd. Chauvin not only lacked the basic level of humanity and decency to remove his knee from a dying man's neck, he showed absolutely no remorse for his crime. And I'm saddened and maybe a little bitter, but there was a good possibility that this could have gone the other way, as many other cases have. Cell phone camera documented George Floyd's murder, but technology is not the hero here. The heroes are those neighbors and passerbyers who stopped to record, to offer help, to beg Chauvin to stop. These active and local citizens, Black, white, brown, Asian, are what will make a difference and what will create change. I hope and believe we are at the turning point that we can confront the iniquities in our nation and our communities. This is George Floyd's legacy, a legacy for true change. I'm so hopeful for this legacy becoming reality. I witnessed community support at the Garden Reflection rally last year. Tens of thousands of people showed up. Some of you board members were there. Thank you so much. People waited in a line for hours just to protest. We had a protest in Newtown. Young, old, white, Black were all in attendance. In our mostly white community, this outpouring of support gives me a strong sense that people are starting to realize the true challenge and plight of African Americans and all people of color. Now, don't get me wrong, I support law enforcement. It is the glue that holds a society together, protecting the innocent from the criminals. I support better training to avoid excessive force, equal force of the law of all citizens, for all citizens, no matter their color. As for our Newtown Police Department, Chief Hearn and I have had lengthy conversations about community policing and his thoughts on the George Floyd tragedy. He's assured me that something like this would never happen here based upon the constant training our Newtown police officers go through and the oversight Chief Hearn has. I support our local police department, but based on our current events, I know there needs to be change and accountability in policing in our country, states, and localities. I don't know what these will be, but I'm eager to be a part of the conversation between the police and the community. I hope my fellow board members are as eager as I am to address the concerns of our constituents. I urge you all to join me in my journey. Diversity enriches the community. We all share common values: to raise our children in a safe community, to live peacefully with our neighbors, but also to accept our obvious differences, whether they are religious beliefs, political views, our origin, or our skin color. As you know, my parents are immigrants to the US. I saw my parents sworn in as citizens of this great country. So I know the pride we all have in being Americans. And I encourage us all to remember that our neighbors may be different, but we are all Americans. We are all part of Newtown's vibrant community. Now, this is a time for us as community leaders to meet the challenges of policing and race head on. The Chauvin verdict is a call to action. Real change requires leadership, sustained commitment, and action. We need to do better. We need to be better and kinder. Together, we can do this. We can make our community stronger, better, more inclusive. We need to just stop, think, engage with each other, listen to each other deeply, hear the common goals and values, come together to work for change in our community, our state, and in our nation. And with that, I thank you for letting me have the floor. I'll turn it back to Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Oxley. Well said. And I'm sure myself and members of this board agree with you. There is time for change for the better, not for the worse. So hopefully we all get to move on and get to make a better society as things progress. Anyone else want to say anything briefly before we move on? I think it was a poignant saying that Mr. Oxley just presented, and I really can't add to it. I just want to say I do agree with you.
Well, I just want to say that was moving, I think, comments. And, I know that there are other people in Newtown who are promoting, what Mr. Oxley was talking about, and especially I want to point out the Human Relations Commission, which often has special guest speakers talking about a range of subjects having to do with diversity and discrimination. And I just hope that more supervisors and others join in those commission meetings, which happen every month. So thank you very much, Mr. Oxley.
I wanted to say thanks to David as well, Mr. Oxley. I am part of an effort in my denomination to look at cross-racial, cross-cultural situations and the ministries that we do, and make sure that that we're being anti-racist. I mean, it's maybe not, for at least for me myself, it's not enough for me to not enough for me to be culturally competent. I have to do something with that. So that's where I'm coming from, and again, I thank you. We're allies.
Yeah, if I might also, David, I agree with what you're saying there. I think there's no room in Newtown for any kind of hate, especially the stuff that you're referring to in that Kansas City and Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Moving along, we're into a public hearing. Jennifer Bonfrisco at 8 Adrian Place, Ridings of Newtown, a PRD variance for in-ground pool / deck, paver deck. Mr. Sander, you want to pick up on this one?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Board members recall that this PRD variance hearing was commenced at your last meeting and continued till tonight to allow the applicant to submit some revised plans, possibly involving some stormwater calculations, et cetera. She did that, and her revised plan was reviewed by the township engineer, and I would like to mark as Exhibit B12 a letter dated April 26, 2021 from the township engineer that reviewed the revised plan. So we're back this evening. If Ms. Bonfrisco looks like she's ready to go. What has happened between last time and tonight in support of your application?
I think basically what's happened is my engineer, the pool company, went back. They talked with his engineer to get clarification to how he calculated his numbers, to get any certification of his qualifications, which I think we had already given that before. But you guys didn't have as much time to see that. Following that, his name is Lee, our engineer spoke with Remington Group and Leanne. I always say her name wrong. I know you're on here, but they had spoke once or twice, and I think we went through all the requirements and to ensure that we met it. I think that's kind of all that's changed since that.
Okay, thank you.
Does Leanna have anything to add to this? Leanna?
Yeah, so we looked at the revised plan, the stormwater management that's provided on this plan meets the ordinance requirements. And we were also provided a letter by the applicant's engineer regarding the stormwater calculations. So they've addressed all our comments at this point.
Have I guess the neighbors that were impacted or were said to be impacted, have they been notified of the adjustments being made? Or I guess Ms. Bonfrisco, you would know best.
No, I wasn't sure what needed to be done, or they would be notified after this meeting, or no.
Mr. Sanders, what would procedure?
Well, there's no requirement that they be notified. The hearing was advertised for the last meeting. It was commenced. There was testimony from Ms. Bonfrisco and exhibits marked. It was continued until tonight. And certainly if any neighbors were concerned and attended that hearing, they would know that it is was rescheduled for or continued until tonight. So perhaps it would be wise to ask for public comment on the application at this point.
Could I just ask a question?
Make a motion first and then go into questions from the board and questions from the public. If there was a motion, how would that be framed, Mr. Sanders?
If there was a motion, Mr. Chairman, it would read as follows. I move to approve the application for a PRD variance for 8 Adrian Place in the Ridings PRD, subject to the applicant meeting all requirements in the Remington and Vernick Engineers Review Letter dated March 23rd, 2021, as revised by the Remington Vernick Review Letter dated April 26th, 2021, to the full satisfaction of the township engineer. Revised plans shall not be signed and recorded until the township engineer signs off on all issues raised in her review letter and all stormwater management issues are addressed to the township engineer's satisfaction.
I make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions from John? You had a question?
Yeah, I just recall, and excuse me if I didn't read over all the details, but there was some confusion about the impervious surface calculation from your engineer's report saying something about de facto, and it was the same impervious surface as currently exists. So was that clarified?
I can comment. Yep, that was clarified. The letter from their engineer was revised to basically take out that whole de facto statement and to just generally say that what the stormwater management that's been designed has been, will meet the new impervious surface that's created. And the original impervious surface percentage was correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Dennis?
A quick question for Leanna. I guess it looks like there's still a couple of items to be finished, but those are all signatures and like paperwork involved.
Yeah, they're all just general comments, just, if the variance plan is approved, just, what signature process has to go through in that. Just that they have to follow the guidelines to get that final submission in for recording.
Thanks.
Just to clarify, we didn't hear anything new from the neighbors that were complaining, right? I think I heard that
We haven't heard anything
from the
outside of
original
the
letters.
hearing, but we haven't asked for public comment yet, so we don't know.
Okay.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, I'll throw it to the public. Anyone have any questions in regards to this motion? Please raise your hand and I will call on you. Okay, seeing none. We have a motion and a second. I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
No, passes 4-1. Okay. I guess you can proceed with your pool.
Now we apply for the permit. Okay.
Okay.
Can I say one other thing?
Sure.
I wanted to say to David Oakley, I'm really moved by your comments. I recently I am dating a wonderful, kind, tall, dark-skinned man, and when we walk through the town, I always feel, like we're fish out of water, and I love anything we're doing for the township to bring more awareness towards diversity, and I applaud you and thank you for that talk.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And keep walking around the town.
Yeah,
Keep doing it.
yeah, definitely. All right. Yeah, I'm obviously was very upset myself from that last week. I think we all were. So, well, thank you guys. And can I sign off now or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Free to
thank you.
go.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Next is consideration of the enactment of the JMZO ordinance called short-term rental. Mr. Sander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A public hearing has been advertised for this evening and is now open and taking place to consider the enactment of an amendment to the joint municipal zoning ordinance that amends the definition of family to provide a minimum time limit by which a family may or has to live in a dwelling unit in order to be considered to be a family. It addresses, and I think the board has seen this probably 4 or 5 times already, it addresses the short-term rentals. This ordinance originated from Upper Makefield. It was brought to Newtown's board, and Newtown's board insisted and was ultimately successful in having a footnote added to the definition of family provision, stating that in enacting this ordinance, the township and its supervisors are not making any judgment or don't want to restrict in any way lifestyles that people may live and undertake. That footnote was incorporated and approved by the other 2 municipalities, and the advertised version of the ordinance has that footnote in it. Again, you've seen this. This is just a formal hearing to allow the public to comment on the application, or rather on the proposed ordinance amendment. Sorry. And if the board is of a mind, it would be a motion to enact JMZO ordinance amendment involving short-term rentals and amending the definition of family accordingly.
Do I have such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Have a second? Going once, going twice. Not here a second. further? This motion
Dies for lack of a
by the
second.
wayside for a lack of a second.
That's correct.
Does it have to be sent through the jointure again, or is just?
We will report back that the motion was made but not seconded, therefore no action was taken, and we'll leave that with the jointure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just if there was anybody from the public who want to comment on this, since there wasn't a second and nothing is going forward, there is really no need for a comment section on this. So just want to let the public know. Okay, we have no land development. On to reports of officials, engineers report.
Thanks. I have no items tonight, but I just wanted to provide a few updates on a few projects that we have going on. Regarding the road program, as you guys know, last meeting, we approved the contract. So the contracts have been prepared. They've been sent to the contractor. So the township should be receiving them shortly in order to execute. So once that's done, hopefully we'll have a better schedule for the township in terms of when that construction is going to start. Regarding the Lower Darlington Road Trail, we recently received comments from the Bucks County Conservation District regarding our permit that we need to construct the trail. So we're working to address those comments, and we'll get that, resubmission in. In the meantime, we have received, preliminary approval from DCNR on the trail design and the bid package. So, we're sort of at that tail end, just waiting on the permits now from the Conservation District, and then that'll be ready to go out to bid. The good news also in the meantime is that, the township received additional funding through DCED through the Multimodal Transportation Fund grant in the amount of $227,000. So that's, great news for the township. There's no municipal match required for that grant. So that's also great news. So hopefully we'll be able to get a little further, with the bid package that we have set up with that new funding. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has them.
Questions for Leanne?
I do. I mean, added up, it sounds like you had some problems with the permit application and you had to redo it. I mean, there's been this year so far, almost $26,000 that Remington and Vernick charged for doing something related to the Lower Darlington Trail. Is that all to redo these permit requests? I don't understand.
Yeah, so
wrong.
So it's not to redo the permit. So basically, as part of the design process, we have to prepare a pretty robust permit application, an NPDES permit with the Bucks County Conservation District, just because we're disturbing such a large area. So it is a very large permit that we have to apply for. So those fees were, they're included in our approved proposal from the township. Those fees are for the design of the stormwater management that ultimately we have to get the permit for from the Conservation District. So they, they have a time frame in which they respond to our comments. So, we were waiting for them for about 2 months as well.
Well, speaking of the time frame, what the heck is the time frame? Because I'm thinking we're getting a little late on to the season where a lot of these projects, we have to bid it out. We have to wait. I don't know how long we have to wait for the permit. And then only then can you bid it out. And then that's another process. I don't know how many days are wasted on that. And what I'm worried about is that these companies that are doing this kind of work already are maybe have a lot of work to do, and they're gonna, we're gonna have a problem getting bids maybe, or we're going to have to pay more than we would have. I just don't understand why, this delay, basically, and how long is it going to take to get the permit approved?
I know the Conservation District has an amount of time in which they have to respond. I anticipate us getting the permit in the month of May. I think that's a good estimate on the time. And then pretty much after that, we'll be ready to go out to bid. Again, there will be a bit of time with bidding. We can do a quick bid as well. Contractors are eager for work as well. With COVID, we can see with the road program, we've been seeing, differences in prices. Some are a little higher, some are lower. So it's sort of a mixed bag right now in terms of the pricing, but I still think that, when we go out to bid, we will have a good crop of bidders, for this type of work.
Well, I hope so, because I think a couple of months ago, I kind of asked the same thing and you said, oh, we should have the permits next month, and now it's still next month. So it keeps on getting pushed down Lower Dolington Road, as it were. So I guess you can't do anything to speed up the process. Thanks very much.
Any other questions for the engineer? Okay, thanks, Leanna. To solicitor's report. We have 5 zoning hearing board applicants. Mr. Sander, I mean, we could go through each one, or I could ask the board if there's anything in particular that they would like to discuss. With the zoning here, we have a Rudy Kratcher. Anyone want to take any kind of action on that? Okay.
No.
Rich Tomlinson. Okay, seeing none. Zach Kemp. And Profco Pineville Acquisitions.
I'd like to discuss that one.
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to send our solicitor to oppose the variances requested.
Okay. Do I have a second? I'll second that. Is there any particular variances that need to be named for Mr. Sander, or?
The motion is to oppose the variances. There are a number of variances that are being requested, as you saw from both Micah's memo and my memo involving this case. There are variances concerning the number of fuel dispensers. There are variances related to signage. I think most of them are related to signage, location of signs, number of signs, type of signs, etc. Those are all the variance requests. There is also a request for a special exception for the use E30 on the property, but I didn't hear a motion to oppose the special exception.
My motion was strictly for the variances.
Strictly for the variances.
And a lot of these other things we'll probably tackle in land development. Is that correct?
Well, certainly there's stormwater issues, traffic issues, et cetera, that will come before you in during land development. But
wasn't there one issue regarding the size of the canopy? The E30 allows 6 fueling dispensers, but only allows a canopy big enough to cover 4 of them, which I think is a fault that we should have picked up on when crafting this E30 use to begin with. I don't know if they've asked for an exception for that, but it seems logical that if they're going to have 6 fueling stations, they should have a canopy large enough to cover that.
I don't see any mention of that in the memo that was prepared regarding the requested relief. The request involving the number of fueling stations is to permit 8 fuel dispensers on the 4.95 acre property, where 6 fuel dispensers are permitted by right, and 7 fuel dispensers would require 0.05 acres of additional ground. The request is for 8 pumps, or 8 fueling pumps, 16 fueling stations, and that is the limit of the relief. I don't see any request for a larger than permitted or required canopy.
Okay, well, this was mentioned by Mr. Van Louvenay extensively at the Planning Commission meeting that I attended. So I don't know if it's a variance or something in land development or whatever, but basically, I'm opposed to the specific variances that would allow 7 pumps, 7 dispensers or 8 dispensers, because as I said before, give them 7, they'll ask for 8. And so I want to stick to our guns on what the E30 ordinance says, and de minimis or not de minimis. What's the negative of de minimis or whatever? It's de maximis. But the other variance I would oppose would be the electronic message sign, which has nothing really to do with how that sign is lit. According to our ordinance, the electronic message center sign is a sign that can be changed electronically. And that's not permitted anywhere in the jointure as far as I see from the ordinance that was cited. So those are the 2 variances. The other variances I'm not quite so concerned about. So I don't know if we want to limit it to those 2 or all of them.
Well,
guess,
you have a motion, and a second to oppose all variances.
Can there be a motion to amend that motion?
You can suggest it, and if the maker agrees to amend it and the seconder agrees to amend a second, then you can move forward with that revised motion.
I don't wish to amend it.
I won't amend the second either, so.
And the most of the variances have to do with the signs. I mean, the fuel pumps there. Yeah. I think all the requested variances that I see here.
If we're not going to back the signage, I mean, why even have it in our zoning then? And that's my opinion.
Yeah. And I agree with sending the solicitor and based on the signs and the number of fuel pumps.
Okay. Well, it's
Can
based on all the variances.
Yeah, basically, yes.
In this case.
Can I ask a question, or is this discussion time? Or?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah.
So that's an OR district, right? So it says OR. Is this the best use out there for the people of the township? In terms of what we can do in terms of finding a better use there that fits needs of our economic challenges and being more fiscally responsible in terms of trying to bring in better revenues. Don't get me wrong, like if I go to the shore, I go to Wawa, I get a bag of ice and whatever else I need. Don't get me wrong, but I'm thinking about what we need here in the township. And yeah, I think that that space can be utilized in a different way. And I know that, as we have progressed in the Economic Development Committee, we're starting to have more conversations with different businesses. And there might be a potential that use can be for something greater for the people of the township. And I think we should consider that as an option instead of just, laying down and giving Wawa an opportunity here. I'm fine with looking at different uses as well, but if someone can explain that to me, I mean, we can utilize a different use there, correct, Mr. Sander?
There are other uses that are permitted in the OR district
That's
other
what I thought. Thank
than
you.
E30 use.
Okay, perfect. So why
Let me
can't we-
just interject. I don't think that's the discussion
Okay.
here. This is the discussion to send the solicitor to defend the township. And then we could discuss what, futuristically, however this transpires would depend on what we would discuss about what would go with that particular property.
But what happens if, all right, we send Mr. Sander to the zoning hearing board? What happens there? Can he bring up, maybe there's an opportunity for a better use there?
That's for his defense. I don't know. I can't tell him what to do as far as how he's going to defend this.
Okay. But maybe it should be something that could be brought up, I think.
Do you have anything that wants to go there that he can bring up?
With regard,
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
if you want me to, I could probably try and,
You'd have done it months ago. I mean, we're at the 11th hour
Well,
and,
if we
a
were
lot of
going
things, a lot of things happen 11th hour.
okay.
if we were going to go down that road, we should have changed the zoning differently and not allowed it in that parcel. That's why I voted no against the zoning change to allow it.
Okay.
Well, let me say this. The legal defense, if I'm authorized to attend, will be to oppose the variances in the best way I can. Mr. Oxley is certainly free to attend the zoning hearings and speak to the zoning hearing board during public comment. He's a resident, as you all are, and is certainly free to express his opinion to the zoning hearing board during public comment.
When is that meeting?
Right now, I believe it's scheduled for Thursday, May 6th.
Thank you.
And just because, we voted the first time doesn't mean that I can't obviously think about it some more and change my mind on what I think is best for the township. So, but thank you.
Democratic way, my friend.
I think
Yeah.
somebody has their hand raised.
I don't see one.
Oh, yeah.
John Van
Yes,
Louvenay.
Where is he?
there's a hand raised, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mr. Van Louvenay, go right ahead. My fault.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a couple of points. I'm not going to argue with your decision to send Mr. Sander. I always enjoy seeing Mr. Sander. The point that I'd like to make in response to Mr. Oxley's comment about other uses is whatever use you put on this site other than E30 will require a variance because the minimum lot size in the OR district is 15 acres. This is the only use that is permitted on less than 15 acres, or said a different way, on a lot that's smaller than 15 acres. So you have a variance regarding for whatever use you put there. This one, of course, by the enactment of the ordinance amendment, you have made this particular use a permitted use by special exception. So it does come down to the variances. The only point that I'd like to make, which I think probably Mr. Fiddler made but did not emphasize, is that there is no part of this lot that is within 1,000 feet of the bypass. So by way, it's an interpretation question as to whether you have permitted a Wawa with no signage. And that's why I think it was important, as the zoning hearing board did, to take a look at, or not as the planning commission did, to see what the actual signage that we as proposed was, rather than saying no signage, because the strict application of the ordinance, you could argue that any of the signs on this property, with the possible exception of the sign on the, I call it the southern side of southern entrance to the Wawa, is visible from the bypass. Whether you actually could see it or read it is the question. That's just a matter of clarification. But so when you say you're opposing all the variances, you could, by interpretation, you could effectively be opposing all of the signs on this property, with the possible exception of the one on the southern entrance door of the Wawa. But that's clarification. You certainly have a right to send Mr. Sander, but I think those are.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to oppose the signs necessarily. But I'm sure it will come down to the zoning hearing board, what their decision might be. And it wouldn't matter, going in there opposing everything.
Not concerned about that, Mr. Mack. We will present our case, and as you said, the zoning hearing board has the jurisdiction to make its decision. And you're just, in this case, you're recommending, like the planning commission usually does when a matter comes before you for decision. So I respect that. I just want to make sure that everyone understands the background for those variants.
But the canopy size, didn't you mention that?
Yes, thank you. That was the other point that I did want to make. The way the ordinance was written, and I did not draft that portion of the ordinance, so I can't explain the logic, but the way the ordinance is written, by right, in the entire jointure, a canopy has a certain length. That happens to be a canopy that would only cover for fueling pump locations. The ordinance then provides that the Board of Supervisors in the OR district has the discretion to grant a larger size canopy. So it's not an application made to the zoning hearing board. It's a matter that must come before the Board of Supervisors during land development. So that if everyone shares your opinion, Mr. Mack, that if there's 6 pumps, we want a canopy covering 6. That's why we showed on our plan what happens by right, then what would happen if we extended it over 6, which we'd be asking you for, if we came before you with land development, and what happens if you extend it over the 7th or the 8th pump. And that was the reason we showed 3 colors on the plan.
Land development will, I'm sorry, land development would be interesting because I also see a sidewalk going to the bypass, and there's a crosswalk over to the church property there. But there's no, you can't walk over there and you can't cross over the bypass. So I'm not quite sure what the sidewalk, what the use of that sidewalk is for.
Well,
I'm
not sure we disagree with you, sir, but there's some comments about whether or not sidewalks should go the other direction. So we should continue across. Eventually, they may continue across the Pico property, then to the other side of the Pico property and along that line. So, but you're right. There are a lot of land development issues, but we're not there yet.
Right.
Mr. Van Louvenet, to your comment about if there was a different use that went there, there would always be a variance. If the different use provided a lot more economic impact to our township and to our residents, then perhaps the variances might make sense. But because
I'm not arguing with that. The point that I'm making is that this.
And what's the
particular
point
use-
then? Because you're telling me that there will always be a variance there. So if there's always a variance there, there'll always be a variance there. All I'm telling you is that that doesn't make sense to me, because if I was to see a use that was better for our residents, that provided them a better opportunity, then the variances might make sense. But right now, they don't. So
No, but
that's where they are.
you were talking about a use. The variances that we're asking for do not speak to the use. The use that we're proposing, the convenience store with gas, is a use permitted by special exception. It's not a use that could only be permitted by lot size variance. We meet the lot size criteria. We meet the requirements for 6 pumps. The only issue that, frankly, let's assume that all the variances are denied. What you would end up with would be a Wawa permitted by special exception, because I can guarantee you that we will meet the requirements for the special exception. You would end up with a Wawa that may have no signage, creating what could be a traffic issue, frankly, on the bypass, because you would have no visibility. You'd have people trying, perhaps getting a view of the canopy, getting a view of the store back there, hitting their brakes because they had no advance notice that there was a Wawa there. That's not necessarily good land use planning. And frankly, that was what I think even those who were not sold on the fact that a Wawa was a good use of this property on the Planning Commission recognized the necessity for reasonable signage. But we'll present that case to the zoning hearing board. And again, you're making a recommendation. I respect your right to do that.
I look forward to seeing you at the zoning hearing board. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from the board?
I had one, and it might be more for Mike or Leanna, about, are there other, and Mr. Chairman, if you want to cut me off and have me ask this later.
No, go right ahead. Go ahead.
Are there any other sites that are 5 acres around Newtown? I looked through my notes and tried to find, well, I guess that needs to be a 4-acre lot, but that would be available for this use.
Not within the OLI district.
And there'd be,
Wasn't that issue searched throughout the jointure, since this would be a jointure issue?
Yeah, there's several provisions under that E30 ordinance that regulate where a use like this can be used, such as frontage onto highways and collector roads and requirements like that.
yes, I saw that too.
So
I'll open it to the public. Anyone from the public have any questions on this? Now again, the motion is to send the solicitor to challenge the variances for the proposed Wawa, correct, Mr. Davis?
Say again.
It's for the solicitor to defend the township against the proposed variances for the, I'll call it the Wawa.
Ralco. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Sander, you're going to the zoning hearing board.
Thank you.
Well,
That
thank
concludes
you
our
for
report,
letting-
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, moving right along, guess we're on to the manager's report. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General fund balance as of this evening.
Wait a minute, hold on. I saw a hand that went up towards the end. Nancy, did you want to say something? You come off mute and turn your camera on.
Okay. I was trying to raise my hand. I couldn't figure out how to do it. My question is, they talked about the signage off of, on 332. What would be the problem of just having a written, like a regular written sign that says Wawa gas? I don't get it. I mean, I've seen it in other, on, you know, like even on highways, you see just a sign that says, you know, 0.5 miles, Wawa, you know, gas, Wawa. You know, I don't understand why it has to be electronic, whether it has to be fancy. I mean, if people see a gas station, you would think that they would have plenty of notice to turn off and go there. Would you be able to clarify that for me?
Well, I think the whole signage issue will come up under land development, of which we can bring that up. That's a very good point. I know the signs you're talking about, like if you're riding on 95 and you see like, you know, it says whatever, Wawa.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, so anyway, that's just my point. I just, you know, keep it simple. You know, it's a small town. So just keep it simple and make it safe for people. I mean, I totally get it. You don't want people stopping and trying to see things, but you know.
I'm sure that's something that we will bring
All
up
right.
for discussion. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I have to leave, but that was just a point that I just wanted to clarify. That's
Yeah, no,
all.
thank you for your input. Appreciate
All
it.
right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lewis, now you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General fund balance as of this evening is $3,046,119. Plan expirations before the board with no action required. And this evening we have Chief Forsyth to give his monthly report. Evening, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to report to the Board of Supervisors for the month of March. We had 102 calls for service. We had 189 hours of training between the Emergency Services Department and the Newtown Fire Association. We had 53 fire safety inspections in the township and 44 fire safety inspections in the borough. I've detailed the report to different sections. If any of you guys have any comments or questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them for you.
Questions for the chief?
Hi, Chief. Thanks for the report. I think in your report you mentioned about tracking expenses to submit to FEMA. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So you're saying this will be a long process, and will we be able to see the list once it is submitted to FEMA?
Absolutely.
Okay.
At the current time, I think there's $32,000 worth of labor that's been submitted to FEMA, and there's roughly $14,000 in materials and equipment that we purchased.
Oh, okay. But this is completely separate from the $1,936,000 that we're supposed to get from the American Rescue Plan. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I've submitted this report. I've talked to the manager several times. I've submitted this report to FEMA and PEMA. We've now separated into two different grants, one for labor force and one for materials and equipment. I submitted everything last week. Some of it was kicked back to me. I now have to go through the itemized list of equipment and materials that we purchased, and I have to justify to PEMA why we purchased it and what it was used for. So that's what I'm in the process.
The devil is in the details.
Yes, yes. The
Okay,
people
thank
at PEMA and FEMA are very nice. However, it's extremely frustrating when you keep doing these reports, and rather than include everything at one time, every time I submit it, I get a phone call from a gentleman at PEMA saying, Chief, everything looks good, but here's an issue that we forgot to tell you. So this has been going on since I think last October. I submitted the first one, and it seems like every month they review it, they kick it back, I send it in, they review it, they kick it back. And last week I had a 2-hour conversation with the folks at PEMA and FEMA, and they said everything looked good. And the next day I got a call back from them saying, we're kicking some of this back for you to explain further. So that's what I'm in the process of now. So
It sounds very similar to the Lower Darlington permit process.
well, it's a process. I can
You
guarantee.
don't have to make a comment on that. Thank you for your work.
No, you're quite welcome.
Any other questions for the chief?
Yeah, I had a question or two. Under inspections, you broke it down by township and borough. What were those numbers again?
53 fire safety inspections in the township and 44 in Newtown Borough.
Okay. And there were, how does this differ? I see the 53 inspections on page 8. Then on page 9, there's the third 43 for the borough, I guess.
44 for the borough. Well, 44.
Yeah, 44. Okay.
One final inspection.
Yeah, I just had to turn the page, and I wasn't doing that.
Anything else for the chief tonight?
And just to clarify, FEMA is Federal Emergency
Emergency Management Agency,
and
PEMA
PEMA.
is Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency.
FEMA and PEMA, right?
FEMA and PEMA. Great people to work with.
Okay, seeing no further questions, chief, appreciate it for your time tonight. Oh, Dennis, did you have another question? All right, go ahead.
I didn't know if maybe I could shift it to old business, but this is fine. This is a good thing. I see the chief had a couple of options. Looking into the future, seeing where we might need to go. A couple of options for staffing emergency services over the coming years. One of those includes the possibility of the SAFER grant.
Correct.
And that would be for up to 5.
I put this report together for our negotiations with the borough. If we're trying to negotiate for 2022, it's hard to put numbers together because if we don't know where we're going, it's hard to put a number together. So I did 2 scenarios, one with the SAFER grant, which would enable us to hire 5 firefighters. I gave you a breakdown on what this would accomplish for the department. Our current staffing is 8 and myself, which it would be 9. An additional 5 would give us 13. This would allow us to go to 2 6-man platoons, and it would give me the opportunity in the township, the opportunity to have an assistant chief in the department. This grant is $1.8 million over 3 years. It's not, there's no contribution by the township, so we're really keeping our fingers crossed that we can get this grant. This would enable us to go to 7 days a week coverage from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and the volunteers would pick up the remaining time. Scenario 2 is without the SAFER grant. I would like to at least hire 3. This would enable us to go to 2 5-man platoons. But as I noted in the report, this won't reduce a lot of our overtime expense. Our overtime would increase because our staff is so senior that they've topped out at their vacation time, their sick time. So I think it's important for us to continue the negotiations with the borough to have some idea what direction we're going. If we think we're going to extend our staffing to 7 days a week, certainly the borough has to pick up a percentage of that cost.
Yes.
Even if we receive the $1.8 million for the 5 firefighters through the SAFER grant for 2022, the township would still see a $500,000 increase by the time we outfitted them in their protective clothing, their uniforms. So there's costs that aren't covered through the grant, but I wanted to make sure the township was aware of this so that we could use this in our negotiations with the borough.
Did I hear you say $500,000 to outfit them?
Yes, it's
I knew you had the outfitting in there. I just didn't remember that number. And so no matter which way we go,
I'm sorry. For uniforms and turnout gear for the 5 firefighters under the grant, it would be a $75,000 additional cost.
Yeah.
For scenario 2, if we just hired 3 firefighters, it would be approximately a $420,000 increase in emergency services budget.
Right.
Between the firefighter salary, benefits, and to outfit them in protective clothing and uniforms.
Right.
As I noted in the report, unfortunately or fortunately, it's time for us to renegotiate the firefighters' contract. So this is everything that we have to take into consideration to negotiate a contract with the borough, or fire service agreement with the borough, so that everyone is paying their fair share.
Right. So, and I can report that the borough is willing to pay a fair share. Now we have to define that. And we're continuing to work on defining that, but they did indicate that as looking into the future, they would be willing to contribute that fair share going into the expansion, however that happens. It's hard for me to characterize the state of the negotiations. I'm kind of frustrated and demoralized a little bit. We have met. We've looked at various formulas. There was some progress, but nothing that John and I felt was worth bringing back to you. That and I don't want to negotiate in public either. I don't want to throw a lot of numbers around unless you really want us to do that. It's just been painfully slow, and actually to the point where last week we just canceled a meeting because we needed to give it some time and space before we go back to it. So I don't know. I mean, we'll continue. I don't know how fast it's going to go, and what the board may want to consider some other options going forward.
Question for you, Chief. Talking about fair share from the borough. If no fair share is given to us, would the borough have to establish their own paid fire department? And approximately how many millions would that cost them to do that?
Well, the Bucks County Planning Commission just finished a report, and it's been submitted to the elected officials of borough and townships, and the Planning Commission has projected it would cost Newtown Borough and Newtown Township $4.9 million per municipality to staff a fire department because of our population and the density of our population. So that's $9.8 million between the 2 municipalities. I don't feel that we need a full-time 24-hour, 7-day-a-week fire department. I certainly don't feel that we need 15 firefighters on duty 24 hours a day. However, we need to come up with a plan, and the borough needs to come up with a plan, because we've supported the fire association for years and years and years. And now it's time that, we picked up the ball with the career staff to provide the service to both municipalities. But it's time that the borough paid their fair share. I mean, they could be looking at $4.9 million 5 or 10 years down the road. The volunteer fire service is dying. I've been relaying that to you folks for the last
Right.
5 years. So sooner or later, it's going to cost somebody a huge hunk of money to put staffing in both buildings, or establish one building and move the fire department into one building. There's a lot of things that came out in our fire study in 2018. There's a lot of things that came out in the county study that was just completed and submitted this year, presented to elected officials this year. So it's important to me that we sit down and try to provide the best service for the most reasonable cost. So it could cost up to $4.9 million to staff a full-time 24-hour, 7-day-a-week fire department.
So it would behoove the borough to probably cooperate with some of our concerns, as opposed to telling their residents they're going to have to raise $4.9 million to staff their own full-time fire department.
Absolutely.
Well,
I have a question, I guess.
I have a comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
To me, we pay to have this service, these firemen, these first responders available, no matter if there is a fire or not a fire, or a call or not a call to be made. So anything based on the number of calls here versus there is sort of irrelevant. I mean, also, it costs more per resident, perhaps, in the borough, just as it would cost more per resident in a borough for when they buy a police vehicle. It's $70,000 whether you're in Newtown or in the borough. And so whatever, the taxpayer would pay for the car in Newtown Township would be much less than the taxpayer in Newtown Borough pays for their police car. So it's the presence of this firefighting service that is worth money. And that's what we need to get across, I think.
Okay. Anything else?
I would just add that this is something that's across the county. The Bucks County Planning Commission report is a quick read, it's 40 pages, but it certainly outlines that we're not in this alone. This is a county-wide thing. But I mean, we have to solve our own problem here, so.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate your input and your report.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 items for the board's consideration this evening. The first of which has to do with the Comcast cable franchise negotiations that Cohen and Associates is doing on behalf of the township. Comcast had, please recall that Cohen and Associates did a quick audit of the fees that Comcast charges to the residents in the township, and they found a deficiency of $259.23 when they finished that audit. So Comcast has provided Cohen and Associates with a settlement agreement for the township to approve or consider. As part of that settlement, the Comcast will pay Newtown Township a total of the $259.23. So if the board's of a mind to approve, the appropriate motion would be consideration to approve the Comcast settlement agreement for $259.23.
Such a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second, okay. Any questions from the board on this this motion?
Can we get more money from them?
Always a good question.
We're working on it.
I know it's maybe not part of this motion, but there is a grant, a public education grant project that process that occurs, and maybe after they finish, Cohen and Associates finishes their work, we'll be able to do something with the PEG grant.
And we have passed along those estimates to Cohen and Associates, so they're going to include it in their negotiations. Yeah.
Any other questions in regards to this? From the board, any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
And last item on my report, Mr. Chairman, is please recall that last meeting we had approved the authorization for the manager and the police chief to sign the grant contracts for the DCED grant for the purchase of 2 police vehicles. The total is $131,900 for the 2 vehicles, and the state has sent us the agreements, and they're fully executed, and we're ready to move forward with the purchase of the 2 vehicles, I'm sorry, and the associated equipment. So all that is necessary tonight, according to our solicitor, is a motion and a movement of the board to consider the purchase of 2 police vehicle SUV patrol vehicles in an amount not to exceed $131,900, and the purchase of associated upfitting and equipment through CoStars.
Have such a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any questions from the board?
Do you estimate that covers the cost, all the costs involved, like
Yes.
refitting it with all the required computers and et cetera?
Yes, the cost that the chief had given to Senator Steve Sanacero's office included all those costs: lettering, upfitting, lighting, computers, laptops, everything. So it's a, once we receive the vehicles and get them processed and upfitted and fit for duty, there will be no costs out of the township's pocket.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I had one more quick thing. Leanna had mentioned earlier under her report that the township did get an additional grant for the Lower Dolington Trail. It was for the total of $227,000 of the $523,000 we had requested. This brings the total grant contribution towards the development of that trail to roughly $602,000, which is, I would say, a very good portion of what that trail is going to end up costing. So there's a good chance that we'll be able to extend the bids once we have it out to bid. And I just wanted to thank Leanna for her help with all of this and obtaining all this funding to date.
Can I ask a question on that? Finish by finish, you mean just going up to the Pico lines, is that it?
I'm sorry, say that again.
When you say the complete trail, it's only going to go up to the Pico property?
Well, the way that the bid is going to be put together is that it's going to, the base bid will go to the Pico property. And then the way we're thinking of constructing the 2 alternates, one would go up to the next intersection. I can't recall what it is.
Yorkshire.
Yorkshire, thank you.
Mhm.
And then the second alternate bid would run it the rest of the way out to Upper Silver Lake Road. So, and that's all based on, the fuel, the paving quantities and the construction costs. So right now, I think you saw with the results of the bid package for the road program, asphalt's a little bit elevated from what we had anticipated. So it may be the partial delay in the permitting process may be a sort of a blessing in disguise should those prices come down over the summer.
I mean, has this plan changed very much since the last time I saw it, with the rain gardens, the crosswalk, stop signs, stuff like that?
The general configuration is the same. The stormwater management that's associated with the permits changed, yes.
changed in what way? I mean, can you specify what the change might have been?
Yeah, so basically, based on the limitations with right of way, we went to an underground trench system. So it, spans the length of the trail in various configurations of size, basically to manage stormwater management. So a lot of it's underground. It won't be seen, but there'll be landscaping along the trail.
But no rain gardens, whatever the heck they are.
No rain gardens at this point, just infiltration trenches. Yep.
It sounds very boring.
It will look boring. Yeah, you won't see it from the
If you're
trail.
walking fast enough, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's multi-use trail, isn't it? You can bicycle too.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And then are there still benches?
Yes, there's benches throughout. Yep.
Okay.
Benches with
Thank you.
trees.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On to bills list, minutes, bills list, and reports. Mr. Mack.
My favorite part of the meeting. I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the April 14, 2021 Board of Supervisors meeting.
A motion, a second.
Second.
Motion second. Any questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Okay, I move that we approve the payment of our bills according to bills list dated April 28, 2021, totaling $250,904.07.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion to second. Any questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
What would happen if I opposed? I don't know. I move that we make interfund transfers totaling $246,350 as per the bills list dated April 28, 2021.
A motion, I have a second.
Second.
A motion is second. If you were to oppose, Mr. Mack, it would have passed 4-1. Any questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes 5-0. Anything else, Mr. Mack? That's it?
No, that's it.
Okay, excellent.
You muted, Phil.
Sorry about that. Into our second session of public comment. Anyone that has any public comment that they'd like to make, please raise their hand and I will call on you. None? Okay. Let's move on to any old business.
Mr. Chairman, I brought up a few times, maybe going back to in-house live meetings. Just figured I would put that back out there, see how people are feeling these days. Folks get vaccinated. I think,
Mr. Oxley wants to get back into the live situation. Okay. Well, I'm getting my second vaccine next week, so I'll hang out with you at the.
Thank you.
Okay, you got it. I guess there's something we could discuss, keep going on and discussing. If the majority of the board sees wanting to have a live, I guess we could always go back to live.
It's good by me.
It's always an option. It's not closed off. So. Okay.
Getting to the point where I'm comfortable with it. Maybe another month.
What counts. Any other old business? Any new business?
I don't know if this is old or new, but I don't know, and I'm not sure if anyone else saw the email that Olivia forwarded to us about the traffic. We have a couple of residents that are interested in reforming a traffic committee. The one that I think they're referencing is the joint traffic committee, and that was one with the borough. I don't know, do we want to look into reinstituting that committee? And I mean, I don't know if people read the email, but there was some justification.
Well, I think if it's a joint committee, someone has to contact the borough to see if they're interested. But if it's a traffic committee involving only traffic patterns within Newtown, we could have a Newtown Township traffic committee. We could put, Olivia could put something out onto the website and onto the channel, soliciting any kind of resumes or letters of intent for people who would like to be that. But Mr. Sander, will we have to officially establish a township traffic impact committee?
Well, that's interesting, Mr. Chairman, because back in 1990, when a state act was passed allowing townships to enact a traffic impact fee ordinance, as part of that, there was a traffic impact fee committee that was required by statute to be set up. And technically, and I haven't looked at the act in a while, but there is a requirement that committee actually meets at least once a year and makes recommendations on the various capital improvements contained in the capital improvements plan, and revisits the land use assumptions and roadway sufficiency analysis that are required as part of the establishment of the impact fee. And I don't know what the status of that is. I suggest that perhaps Mr. Lewis and I look into the status of that. And if we're required to have a committee, we will bring a recommendation back to the board to appoint such a committee. I do know that there are it can't just be 5 or 7 or 9 residents. There are requirements to have a certain percentage of the committee be representatives from the real estate and development realms, as well as residents and folks in general. So let us take a look at that and come back. If that's the type of traffic impact committee that you're talking about, I would assume that if you wanted to establish a separate traffic committee that would look into traffic problems and not concern itself with within the box created by the capital improvements plan, then that would require a separate action by the board to create that committee. We'd look to see how our other committees of a similar nature are created, whether by resolution or by ordinance, and undertake to create that as you wish. So there's 2 different things we may be looking at here. And it sounds like, Dennis, you're favoring the latter over the former.
Yeah, or the former. And I went back and I did pull down some information off of our township, the E-codes that you can enter, do a search, and I searched for traffic committees. I found 2 traffic committees. One was that have been in Newtown before. One is the joint traffic committee. That is the one with the borough. But then the other is a Newtown Township Traffic Committee that seemed to have morphed from the one that dealt with the impact fees and things. So I would just say, and this was something that was formed by resolution in 2010. So
I have a question.
I can look at it. It's 471 and 461.
Couldn't we just, if it's advisory, could we just recreate or amend that resolution to say, hey, Newtown Township Traffic, and if the borough wants to do a joint one, that same group on our behalf will be part of that group, rather than have 2 different committees? I mean, you're gonna be hard pressed probably to find that many volunteers.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. I was thinking basically the same thing.
So with the direction of the board, and I know it's still be discussed, if the direction of the board is that we pursue this, Mr. Lewis and I will look at those two resolutions, Dennis, decide whether we can revise or amend one of them to create our own committee, leaving open the option of making it a joint committee or accepting members from the borough if they wish to participate. Is that what I'm hearing?
That sounds
It's
good.
going same.
But would this committee need to have that kind of complex structure in terms of who needs to serve on it? Like real
No,
estate
absolutely
agents?
not, John. This would not be an act, I forget what the 209 it is.
Okay.
It wouldn't be an Act 209 committee at all. That's
If it's advisory, yeah, we can just do kind of what we want. So
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, you have your mission, Mr. Sander and Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Any other new business? I have something, and I guess this is directed to Mr. Mack, as he had brought it up on the patch today. And I just want to know if it would be brought up for discussion, probably not tonight, but maybe at a later date. You want to know how Newtown should spend their estimated $1.9 million it will receive from the federal COVID-19 relief fund. And I know you're sending out a survey, but we're the ones that have to make the decision, not the survey. And I was just wondering if this should be discussed at maybe a future meeting, how the rest of the boards may feel about this. And also, I just want to ask Mr. Sander if he could just elaborate on what this $1.9 million could be used for in the township.
Good question. There are right now, and it's very early going. There are 4 areas that the funds can be used for. And Mr. Lewis, I'm going to ask for your assistance here because you sent out a communication to me today that I'm sure I could locate if I tried, concerning those 4 general areas in which funds can be used. Do you have them handy?
Yeah, I do have them.
Thank you.
Mr. Standard. The 4 areas that they say that we can use, the township can use that money towards. First is responding to COVID-19 emergency or addressing its negative economic impacts. This would be for household, small business, nonprofit, and industries such as tourism and hospitality. The second is providing minimum pay to eligible workers performing essential work or grants eligible to employees that have eligible workers. It's for a premium pay for employees that were partaking in actual work during the pandemic. Lost revenue replacement for the provisions of government services due to COVID-19. Basically what that means is we can use our benchmark of 2019 year-end actuals and reimburse the township general fund for any deficiencies caused by the pandemic. Most notably, that would include the loss in revenue from park and rec programs and camps from last year.
Do you have an estimate on what that is? Any idea?
I do not off the top of my
Okay.
head without.
Just curious. Don't worry about it. Let us know.
The 4th is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Obviously, Newtown Township gets the water and sewer from Newtown Artesian and the Joint Municipal Authority. So if the township goes up in mind, some of that money could be distributed to them. So those are the 4 areas.
Also, thank you, Mr. Lewis. And let me note, Mr. Chairman, that two other things. This money does not have to be spent until 2024. And secondly, we meaning all municipalities in the Commonwealth are waiting for regulations to be promulgated by the U.S. Treasury Department. That will provide a much greater detail on what the funds can be used for. Again, Mr. Lewis and I participated in a PSATS town hall seminar where they reviewed the generalities of this thing, and they do know how much everybody's going to get. But again, the devil's in the details, and we won't know. I should say, when we know, you will know. As soon as we find out what the regs say, we will brief you on what the money can be used for and how much time you have to decide that.
That PSAT's webinar you mentioned, do they have an archive of that somewhere? I tried looking on the website, couldn't find it.
Sure.
Town halls, John, I think they are accessible. Things that have happened in the past that they've held, I think they're absolutely accessible. Maybe a quick call over there, and you can just ask quickly where that's accessible. But I'm almost certain that you can listen to previously recorded seminars.
Yes, I got a lot of good recommendations for my survey. One
Oh, I'm
fellow,
sure.
he said,
I'm
take
sure.
the money in $1 bills, shove those bills up a body orifice of every politician, blah, blah, blah.
That's a great recommendation. That's very good, John. In regards to the distribution of these funds, who determines that? Is that the Board of Supervisors? Does that come from any kind of state regulatory?
Board of Supervisors will have the ultimate discretion as long as it's within the regs, and there will be reporting requirements. I got word that a township that is going to be spending funds has to have a DUNS, Dun and Bradstreet number. It's called a DUNS number. I confirmed with Mr. Lewis that the township does have one, so we're set to go there with regard to reporting. But again, we don't know what all of the reporting requirements are going to be until the regs come.
May I ask one other question? And you're expecting the regulations to come from the Treasury, U.S. Treasury Department. Is there another layer of regulations we might expect from the state?
I don't think so. The state may give advice or have input on interpreting the regs. I don't know. I don't think the state plays a separate role. The state, of course, is getting its own money. So a lot more than we are. So they will have to comply with the regs. That's why they're federal regs. They'll apply to everyone the same. But I think they're expected by June. I seem to recall June as now I don't know whether beginning of June, end of June, as a benchmark for expecting the regs on the use of funds.
Because the funds are supposed to be available in June, so.
So is this something that we should be discussing fairly soon, or? Yeah, go ahead.
I would recommend that we wait until the regs come out and we have a really strong idea and control over exactly what we can and can't do with the funds. Before that, any discussion would probably be speculation. We know generally what we can and can't use them for, but again, let's say we want to reimburse Newtown Artesian for water, which I'm throwing out a kind of a doubtful one, but we don't know the details on that. We think we can do it as a general rule, but we don't know if there's a limit to that, if there's what actions you have to take, what actions they have to take, how we have to report what we've did and what the reasons are. So I'd suggest we wait to get the regs. And again, there's plenty of time.
Any other questions regarding this? John, thank you for bringing this, bringing this to our attention. I think it's something we'll probably be discussing in the future. So, anyone else? New business? Okay, seeing none, I will. I guess there's no need for an executive session tonight.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So without objection, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Without objection.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good
Take
night,
care.
everybody.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
later.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Be well.